Morning, everyone. This is Dan Tuig. I'm the board chair of the IGES Board of Directors with Motorola Solutions, and excited to be here for the 2021 IGES mid-year briefing, virtual. Hopefully our last virtual session. I'm sure we'll do some hybrid. There's some positive lessons learned in all the pandemic activity, but hopefully this is our final virtual event that we have, at least exclusively virtual. And but anyways, welcome and excited to be here. And we have an incredible lineup of topics today and tomorrow for the event. And excited everybody can attend, and welcome. Hey, want to run through a couple things on mission and objectives of IGES, just to reinforce the spirit of the organization. I know there's there's always new participants that join us, and I thought it would be good just to reinforce who we are, what we do, the purpose of the organization, what brings members and practitioners together, to collaborate. We're a nonprofit, obviously, an alliance working to promote and enable technology, the use of technology and the benefits of technology in the public sector, and also those technologies that expand the use of information sharing to maximize safety, efficiency, and productivity. Information's the key to protecting our citizens and enabling our communities to be safer and so forth. And there's obviously an expanding information pool out there, and a lot of work to do in the technology arena to make it effective. The other piece is advocacy. We advocate for policies, processes, and information sharing standards that impact our safety, security, build knowledge on behalf of our stakeholders, and connect organizations and leaders with various communities of interest, and really unlocking the power of information in the right way, right? So, and that's all through partnerships between public and private sector members. And those critical success factors are paramount. You can't have one without the other. The reason I'm so passionate about IGES being with Motorola, obviously we're very active in the public safety community, and it gives me the opportunity to work with my peer companies that we see out in the marketplace, along with have access to the public leadership in our communities and in DC and so forth. So it's a great marriage of public and private sector missions. We've been pretty active here the last year, even though the pandemic has caused us to go fully virtual. We've accomplished a lot. Obviously, it's Maria's first year in as our executive leader of the organization, and a year has gone by quickly. I've been the board chair. We ran a really active election process. We had 6 open slots on the board this session, and we just went through an election process. And we have 5 new members and 1 re-election. Roger Mann has been re-elected, no surprise, and Roger is the incoming chair. He'll take my seat. I'll still be on the board. Roger takes the chairman position. Joe Wheeler joins us from Mission Critical Partners. Obviously, Joe's very active in the organization, and great to have him with us. Rick Zach from Microsoft, Juan Colon from SAS, Mike Lesko from NEC America, and Ryan Birchnell from AT&T. A great lineup of leaders in their respective companies, and excited to have them part of the board. I also want to thank, there was a lot of interest in these board positions, and there were several candidates that participated as well. I want to thank them for their efforts and encourage them to take another run in the next go around. I think one of the aspects of getting on the board is the awareness of who you are and your kind of your passion for the role, and kind of getting your name out there, and just because you didn't get on it this time doesn't mean you shouldn't go after it again. So thanks for your pursuit, and look forward to your engagement in the future. We have an August board meeting coming up, and which is right around the corner in a week or two. And we will then fill out the subcommittee chairs on the board, and we'll have a press release to the members on that activity. So look forward to sharing that. And with that, I'm going to hand the baton over to Roger Mann as our incoming chairman, and want to thank everyone for participating today, and look forward to a really great session. So Roger, over to you.
Thank you, Dan. I want to welcome everybody to our mid-year. Over the years, I learned that the mid-year is a great, I'll call it watering hole, although it's a virtual one this year, in which we get to share a lot of diverse perspectives and insights of emerging needs across the communities of interest. And to go a little further on Dan's theme of the critical value of partnerships, IGES is really unique. Everyone checks their corporate identities at the door and works together in a public-private partnership to advance the missions. And over the years, IGES has stood up and grown some extremely vibrant committees. And there's 6 of them right now, and each and every one of them is making a difference for society, and this specifically within the IGES mission scope. The first one I'll mention is the law enforcement one. It's done tremendous work in biometrics and CAD to CAD interoperability, CAD to RMS, a variety of things that really matter to the law enforcement practitioners, and then those industry, companies that are members and even non-members that benefit from the advances that are being made in that partnership. And then CGIS, which is, at the very, very heart. That's the second advisory committee, and the very, very heart of interoperability and information sharing for criminal justice information. The courts advisory committee, courts, starting back in 2016, really showed the way of a very special sequence of annual summits, and to focus on current and emerging needs, and again, pull practitioners and private companies together to advance those causes. Likewise, corrections, extremely vibrant advisory committee. Courts and corrections, for those of you who are fairly new to IGES, you can find some really great portals through the IGES website for courts and corrections that have been subcategorized into where you can get capabilities across the spectrums of the courts and corrections needs. Technology and architecture, everything's underpinned by where technology and solid architectural design come in. So, just fantastic talent from, world-class architects from member companies and practitioners in the Technology and Architecture Committee. And the most recent one we stood up about a year and a half ago, and it's no accident that it coincided with the pandemic, was emergency communication and response. If ever there was a place where the speed of need catalyzed that committee and its vibrancy, it immediately attracted dozens of practitioners and members. And we held the Emergency Communications and Response first annual summit yesterday. And it really, there was just so many perspectives and experience in the panels that were then shared, best practices, challenges, and how to tackle, remote ECCs, PSAPs, the research that's being advanced to better enable user-centered workflows. There's a great treatment for anyone that's, in this domain. IGES's work on pulling what's affectionately called the elephant diagram. How do you solve a problem? First, you have to define that elephant that you're dealing with, and then take it a piece at a time towards the solutions, again, for societal benefit in emergency communication and response. So that, that mind map, that model of the elephant diagram is fantastic. And I commend that to those that are in that domain. We had a really nice panel on the changing paradigm of call receipt nationally. I had my eyes open yesterday in the summit that the NTOC that was run to receive national suspicious activities, these sorts of things. They're getting upwards of 6,000 calls per day. And then everything happens locally. So how do you get that right information to the local authorities in a timely way, in an accurate way? These things are being tackled. And again, a lot of great practitioners showing us the way, and then, working as force multipliers across state and local. We saw a really, really insightful panel on operational response models. And we had practitioners, that have a lot of experience in dealing with the pandemic scenarios, in dealing with the way you get the next gen 911 actually deployed, operationalized, some of the best practices. Many of these are being recorded and shared through IGIS, so that, all those experiences can be, acted upon across the nation. There was a really good tech innovations panel where we had industry technologists sharing the enabling technologies, ranging from 5G to cloud enablement, to some of the InfoSec sort of things you have to, deal with for assuredness and in emergency communications and response. A really good dialogue, and quite a number of good questions, and then from the people that participated in that panel, and all of those. I think we had over 160 people register for this summit, and I think we had well over 90 live, and I know many other people will be watching it, when they can. We had a nice visionary leadership panel that had representation from public safety communications research out of NIST and Boulder, and folks, out of Department of Transportation that are working, these next generation over the horizon, but shortly over the horizon as the needs are pulling it. And we had, CTO types from innovative, places out of Commonwealth of Virginia as an example in that panel. And again, they really sparked a lot of best practices in where we're headed with smart communities and sensors and all sorts of data that can be supplied into the workflows of the dispatchers and responders and the telecommunications professionals. I'll say at this juncture that one of the threads that went through all of the panels was the people dimension. You can feel, just like Dan mentioned, the passion, and I think that's a unifying cultural trait of IGIS members and practitioners and industry alike, is they really care and they recognize that workforce development, the next generation of across all the verticals that IGIS focuses on is paramount to success. And you could feel that. You could feel that in a virtual, and the ways in which these leaders are making that cultural shift to ensure that the future generations of the professionals in our areas are enabled to be very prosperous and successful. And then we had the last panel of the day was a facilitated discussions, on some of the operations from folks that are in city management and in county, places that are, really the pointy end of the citizens' needs for the emergency communications and response. And some of the, what they're finding is bringing the capabilities. I think one of the great phrases I heard out of that was, making people and systems ready for each other, something along those lines. And when you're, managing a county and the citizens expect citizen services, it's good to hear, how we handle those things. We had some great participation again from some folks that have been at that for quite some time and are really bringing some innovative ways to bring capabilities into operations. I think the results of that committee tell us resoundingly, just like the other committees across IGES, that there's a real thirst for what IGES is offering, through emergency communications, just like in every one of those other advisory committees and their summits. With that, I would like to turn it back over to Maria. Maria, as the executive director of IGES, runs an amazing team of dedicated professionals, and we're very, very fortunate for her and her staff. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you, Roger, and thank you, Dan. I want to add my thanks and welcome for all of you joining us today. We understand that your competition for time is probably very high despite this virtual setting, but we are confident that we've set up what is a very informative 2 days of an agenda. Before we introduce our first speaker, I want to just give you the highlights that we'll be presenting to you over the next 2 days. In order to support the overall theme of how the justice reform challenge could and should be met by the IGES community, to include both practitioners and industry, we've brought together various perspectives on criminal justice reform. We all know that if we ask different individuals what are the different priorities that they would like to be addressed, there's not necessarily a mirror reflection from one individual to another. Despite that, we have brought together what are extraordinary voices from the federal, state, and local policy leaders. We've brought practitioners from law enforcement, courts, corrections, parole, and probation entities. We've brought together private sector representatives with considerable experience in supporting justice domain throughout their individual careers, and they will be sharing with us their case studies of what's been successful and maybe what's been a little bit challenging. And we've brought leadership voices from the practitioner groups across the justice spectrum. Our goal with all of that is to solicit the disparate perspectives regarding the priorities that we address, and hopefully try to prioritize those in a reasonable fashion. To that end, we also seek to enable a dialogue between the critical players while engaging our membership and ultimately coming to an understanding of the commitments, the priorities, and needs that we need to address. From a high-level review of the agenda, we start each day with a national leader to provide a big picture view. We follow that with panels that then will represent each of those domains that I made reference to. So the first day we have law enforcement, we have courts. The second day we have parole, corrections, and probation. We followed that with what is an additional speaker, one from the state perspective, one from the private sector perspective, and then have a panel that then will provide us that case study that I made reference to. After that, we bring together all of the practitioner groups. We have representatives from NGA, from NCJA, from IACP, from APA, et cetera. The laundry list of alphabet soup is very, very long. We couldn't be happier to have all those voices that come to us. And lastly, for each day, we provide what is a panel from our committees and our practitioner groups that demonstrate the value and the progress that has been made within our committees to support the justice reform effort. We believe that the agenda is not only informative, but most importantly should spark a dialogue and spark thought on everyone's part in order to how best revisit the priorities that we can address and collectively work towards progress in those areas. Before I introduce our speaker, I just want to speak a little bit about housekeeping as well. We understand that this virtual setting still provides a bit of a barrier by way of connectivity. To that end, We still encourage you to add your comments and or questions to the chat box. We will invite you up to the podium, the virtual podium as it were, when the opportunity allows for any questions for the respective speakers. And in the meantime, we then ask that your cameras be off and your mics be off as well. It will allow us to focus on the individual speakers. It'll ensure that there's no distractions for those individuals. And it again allows us to be a little bit focused. So we appreciate your being with us, and we're going to start what is a great panel. I could not be happier, and the IJIS Board of Directors, our IJIS Home Office could not be happier than having our very first keynote speaker, Roy Austin, address our group. For those that aren't familiar with his background, and I doubt that there's many, but for those that aren't, he was the former director of the Division of Civil Rights out of the Department of Justice. He was a transition member for this current administration, and he is currently now the VP of Civil Rights and the Deputy General Counsel for Facebook. When you talk about a vita or a background that is representative of the types of voices that we need to hear from in order to understand the problems and consider the priorities that we should address, it is this formula that we should look at. It is a national picture, it is a local understanding, and it is the private sector contribution. To that end, he not only has done all those things in his career, but he has also been a contributor on the 21st Century Policing Report. He has developed a report that speaks to big data and civil rights. And he also has contributed and developed a police data initiative. Again, when you talk about what we would love to have at the table, that's a perfect marriage as it relates to what IJIS can bring to the table with its community of practitioners and industry. Roy, I couldn't be happier to have you. I'm looking forward to your comments. If we have time for one or two questions, I might be able to pose those to you. But welcome to the IJIS community. Welcome to our mid-year briefing.
And thank you very much, Maria, and thank you for the very kind introduction. When you were going through the logistics, I missed the part where you tell people that the bathrooms are down the hall, and hopefully sometime we can return to those kinds of logistics. So again, thank you very, very much for everything and for having me. You know, I am honored to be at the Integrated Justice Information Systems Mid-Year Briefing and Member Forum. I believe I spoke to you some time ago. Since 2001, IJIS has worked to promote and enable technology in the public sector and expand the use of information to maximize safety, efficiency, and productivity. Your focus on bringing multiple sectors together is just the kind of forward thinking we need to solve some of the biggest challenges of today. Now, let me start with a little bit about my journey. I come to you today as a Black man who has been illegally stopped and searched by law enforcement. I come to you today as a Black man who has relied on excellent law enforcement officers to help me investigate rapes, homicide, and law enforcement misconduct. And I come to you as a Black man who knows that he needs great law enforcement officers to protect me, my family, and my community from harm. Now, despite growing up in the safe and not particularly diverse town of State College, Pennsylvania, my parents always watched the news coming out of New York City. The news almost always started with images of Black boys and young men who were killed, and Black boys and young men being arrested. Now, I got into criminal justice work in part because my father was a criminology professor at Penn State University, one who taught future police officers and future criminal justice reform advocates in the same classroom. And I got into civil rights work because I understood at an early age how lucky I was to grow up in an environment where I grew up and wanted all young people to have the same opportunities that I was afforded. Now, having the same opportunities that I was afforded means fighting for justice, fairness, and equity. And I use the term equity intentionally. It is not just about waiting more than 300 years in America's history and deciding that now is the moment when we try to treat everyone equally. Equity is recognizing our history, A history when Blacks were treated as less than human, when women were not allowed to pursue certain educational and work opportunities, yes, including policing, when immigrants were discriminated against in employment and housing, and what that history did to those communities and why we must be fighting for equity. The idea of meeting people where they actually are and providing them with what they actually need to succeed. Now, all sectors should look at what is needed to address the challenges of belonging to a historically discriminated against or marginalized community, whether it be race, color, religion, national origin, ethnicity, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability or some intersectional combination of those. And all sectors should be looking at how they can equalize the playing field. I found that the commitment to equity supported me during my difficult cases when I was investigating, prosecuting hate crimes and police brutality around the country for the US Department of Justice. And it helped me when I worked in the Obama administration on the Police Data Initiative and the My Brother's Keeper Task Force. These initiatives resulted in real transparency in policing for police departments, improved life opportunities for those who were touched by My Brother's Keeper, and resulted in a serious look at the risks of reliance on bad and questionable data. So let's talk a little bit about data. Now, I recognize that I may be preaching to the choir here, but as you know, our justice system data is absolutely horrible. And horrible data leads to horrible results, and that is simply unacceptable. It is unacceptable in business. It should be unacceptable for the most important facets of life. We have amazing employment data that comes out publicly every month. We have amazing business data that is reported at least every quarter. Successful businesses use good data to identify problems and use good data to identify solutions. So why? For something as important as public safety, is our data so incredibly bad? So what do I mean by calling it bad? I mean, it is late. I mean, it is inaccurate. I mean that we do not collect it for the information that we should collect it for. I mean that it comes out in difficult to decipher charts and spreadsheets from the 1980s. Now, I know that there have been talk about changes. These changes aren't coming fast enough. If you sit here today, do you know how many homicides there were across the country last month? Do you know how many reported rapes there were? Do you know how many reported aggravated assaults we had? If not for June, do you know the answer for January? Sadly, the answer is that you do not. There are actual answers for these questions. Why don't we have this information? Wouldn't it be important to have it? Wouldn't it help the law enforcement professionals listening to me now to know this information? It actually would not be that hard to count. If someone would just require police departments and sheriff's offices across the country to publicly report these numbers. They have them. We know they have them because they claim that they engage in predictive policing. We know they have them because they send law enforcement to supposed hotspots. What are we afraid of? Are we afraid of the truth? Across this country, how many times did law enforcement stop, search, arrest, use deadly force on Black men last month? How about with respect to white men? What about Latinos? What about intersectional considerations, Black women, Latinas, Native Americans? Again, this information is completely knowable. Some want to say that we don't have a race problem with our criminal justice system. Well, if that is so, then I ask you to please show your math. I don't want to put the blame just on the police. School resource officers, how many Black kids did you send to juvenile detention? What were their offenses? Prosecutors, how many cases did you dismiss last month? What plea bargains did you give last month? For what crimes? Were Black defendants treated differently than white defendants? Prison officials, who do you have in solitary confinement? Who do you have in educational programming, job programming, mental health program? Who did you use force on? Who did you discipline and for what? Courts, who did you sentence for what? Who did you hold in pretrial detention and for what? Again, all of this information is readily knowable. We just have to count it, but we don't. All of this data should be transparently presented to the country, and we just don't do it. We don't know what we don't know, and while ignorance may be bliss for some, with respect to criminal justice data, it is dangerous to know so little. I just can, could, should be leading on this effort. So what does any of this have to do with my current position as Facebook's Vice President of Civil Rights? In my career, I've gone from prosecuting individual officers, working with entire police departments like the New Orleans Police Department, to working on an effort to improve policing across 18,000 law enforcement agencies with the Task Force on 21st Century Policing, to working across the criminal justice, civil rights, housing, labor, and human services sectors, because of a realization that we cannot address the biggest issues of the day through a narrow lens. I have joined a company whose products are used by hundreds of millions of people in the United States and billions of people around the world. It is an incredibly exciting opportunity for me to use my experience and hopefully make an impact on a global scale. There are now more than 3.45 billion people using our services every month, and over 2.7 billion every day. To put that into perspective, there are only 7.6 billion people in the world. And the national and global awakening around civil rights happened and continues to happen online. So much of our world has moved online to places like Facebook. Everything from where law enforcement agencies tell their stories, to where we grow a small business, to where we fundraise for causes we care about, and how we organize events, to where we get our news, where we find out where we can vote, where we discuss the best ways to improve our criminal justice system, and where we just meet other people. All of this is done and can be done online. Because Facebook is involved in so many facets of life, the company really has an opportunity and actually a responsibility to create products and policies that have a positive impact. How I see my job is actually quite simple. Just two things. First, that Facebook does no harm. And second, that Facebook does good. I recommend that you look for ways to similarly simplify how your businesses, government agencies, and nonprofits operate. For my team, doing no harm means ensuring that our products, our services, and platform aren't being used to harm, target, or attack marginalized communities and people of color. Doing good means looking at existing technologies, new technologies like Oculus, and issues like voting rights, and make sure that we are using those to move the needle toward equity. Facebook has made progress to advance and protect civil rights, especially by bringing in a civil rights expert, Laura Murphy, who conducted a transparent audit of the company. We have more work to do, and that's where my team and I come in. Our team is really focused on helping the company advance strong, inclusive, and non-discriminatory practices across artificial intelligence and policies and products on the front end, in the middle, and at the end of the creation process. Something that I hope more companies and sectors recognize as essential work. Our goal is to protect the rights and freedoms of those who use Facebook, regardless of race, color, ethnicity, national origin, faith, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability. When we do that, Facebook and its products become places where all feel welcome. If we can help mitigate the harm or concerns around issues such as hate speech and false information and bias, Facebook's stated goal of building a global community that works for all of us comes closer to a reality. And if we amplify the social good of our community grows stronger. Our team is deeply committed to this mission, and we have experts in criminal justice, hate crimes, counterterrorism, immigration, national security, voting rights, tech product, and tech policy. Our process of building a team and developing our mission is something that you could use as a roadmap within your own business, government office, or nonprofit. When you are deciding to use technology, whether that be a cloud service, artificial intelligence, machine learning, or other features, think through how this could do good and how you can make sure no harm comes from it. Having a simple conversation to think about that will help your end results be holistically inclusive. Further, think through how your business, government agency, or nonprofit could build out a position for a civil rights function or team. Having dedicated staff that look at these issues across your operations, and specifically when it comes to the technology you use. Now that can do a lot of good. This work is so important. As IJIS knows, only when we come together as a collective public, nonprofit, academic, and private sector unit can we build real, lasting change toward equity. I hope that you will reach out and partner with my team. And I encourage you to continue using your voice, your power, your strength, your resources to make this world a better place. Thank you very much for your time.
Roy, thank you for your comments. Given a couple of minutes that we still have on the agenda, I'm going to speak to a couple of your points. You started off with fairness, justice, focusing on equity, which of course it makes entire sense. And then you made reference to that not only us as individuals, but us as individual organizations should focus on the opportunities and the responsibilities of doing no harm and doing good. Talk to me about what your view and what your experience would offer us with regard to how should we address this national issue. I totally agree with you that we individually have obligations and that our organizations should do what we can. But when we talk about development of a strategy that I'm wholeheartedly in support of as with regard to IJIS engagement, how do we address those 18,000 law enforcement officers? How do we address the courts? How do we address the parole and probation groups from a reform strategy nationwide? Do you have any views that, any seeds of thought that we might be able to incorporate within our development of our strategy?
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Maria. And look, I mean, first of all, and this is what IJIS does so well, because you bring all these folks to the table. You bring, look, courts aren't going to listen, even if it's a great idea, if they don't feel like they had a seat at the table. Formerly incarcerated people aren't going to listen, even if it's a great idea, if they don't feel like they had a seat at the table. So as IJIS does, is you have to bring people to the table. You have to narrow the to-do list a little bit. Okay, we kind of have this entire marketplace of different ideas that we're working on, and we don't concentrate on any in particular. And that's why I really put a focus on data here. We're really making a huge mistake, and we've been making this mistake for the 25 plus years that I've been in this business, of not concentrating on the absolute fundamental, and that is data. You can't win any of these arguments. We can't determine whether or not a program is good or bad. We can't see if something is working in Seattle, whether it will work in Austin, Texas. We can't see whether a program is working in Minneapolis, whether it will work in Washington, D.C., because we don't share that data and those numbers. And so we have to come together as a community of people who recognize the importance of public safety, and we have to start sharing that data. We can't scale up programs that seem promising because the data is so bad. And we keep using this bad data to come to conclusions. So that's why I emphasize the need for data and for using that data. So, it is about bringing people together, and it is about advocacy. It's about getting rid of this nonsensical argument that police reform is anti-police. We have to stop that nonsense. Police reform is good for police, it's good for communities, it's good for our public safety if we do it in the right way. Holding people accountable is never a bad thing to do. And we have to start doing that, and we have to start demanding that, and we have to start having these false arguments that we are having. So those are just some of the thoughts I have. And look, every smart person knows that these are false arguments.
Mhm.
They know that if a police officer engages in misconduct, if the community doesn't trust the police, that we're not going to be doing our best, that we're going to be stuck with our 60% homicide clearance rate and lower clearance rates for everything else. We've got to stop the nonsensical arguments and start moving toward real arguments and making real change. And I honestly think that a lot of that starts with something as boring and simple as better data.
So one follow-up question. Yesterday and nearly all of these type of events, we see that the technology is relatively simple and the people component, the cultural shift is where the challenges are. I certainly agree with you that convening the disparate groups, getting their buy-in, having them at the table in order to craft the solution will help ensure success. Talk to us about how we can contribute to the cultural shift in being part of a strategy that makes a difference for the cultural shift, even to have those individuals come to the table so that we could see the data to substantiate the thesis that then we can test and evaluate.
So one very specific thing, or let me give you two very specific things and one more general thing. One is the work that I'm doing right now in the Council on Criminal Justice. We just went through policing and went through and did these very short papers. They're like 4 pages, 3-4 pages of information where we tell the story. This was police leaders, activists from Black Lives Matter and other places, academics came together and talked about the state of the research across a couple dozen different questions. I would recommend people take a look at those because I think they are fantastic. I mean, obviously I'm biased because I was involved in the process, but I think that it really nails down a bunch of separate issues. Another program to look at is ABLE, Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement. Again, I'm involved, so again, there is some bias here, but I'm involved because I believe in this program. And when you speak of culture, Maria, that's what this program is talking about. It's talking about changing the culture of policing such that a police officer will tap the shoulder of a fellow police officer when they think things are going out of control or when they think that there's a possibility that something is going to go wrong. It's not about turning in your officers to internal affairs. It's about changing the internal culture where the lowest ranking officer can go to the chief of police and say, hey, chief, let me take care of this one because I think you need a break. It is a powerful, powerful idea. And let me be clear, we all need it. Okay, we need it in the legal profession, we need it in the business world, but there's no place where the individual act of an officer is a matter of life and death and can be a matter of life and death each and every day. And so we need it there more than other places. And then finally, I think it is on changing culture is we do have to start moving toward the truth. We need to be having honest discussions and honest arguments. Look, these questions are not easy. I don't want to pretend that they're easy, but we're making them a lot harder by wasting a lot of time on arguments that are everyone knows are dumb arguments, where everybody is taking their side. You know, honestly, we're not getting rid of police. I don't want us to get rid of police. We don't live in a society where we can get rid of police. Let's stop either making that argument or claiming that the other side is making that argument. We also need to reform policing. We know that there's a disparate impact in who is stopped, who is searched, who is arrested in this country. And that is going to cause communities not to have trust. So let's put that on the table and say, yes, that's a given. And I don't want to demonize either side, but I want us to start speaking in truths. And any honest person knows these truths.
That's great. A couple of things. First of all, I just will certainly take you up on your offer and engaging in anything Facebook is doing. And we would like to offer you the opportunity to be part of whatever strategy that we are able to develop with you for the betterment of all of the practitioners within the justice component. We know that, police are made reference to, but all your themes, Roy, of the data, of equity, of parity, all of that is so true in every little silo that we call our justice community. So to that end, we most certainly not only would love to participate, but we would love to engage you in whatever we're able to contribute to. So before I give you our last thanks, any words of wisdoms, any parting messages that you would like to offer our audience?
Look, I just want to thank you, Maria, for taking on this work, and the audience members who, again, I recognize in many ways are preaching to the choir here. These are people who believe in this mission, who do this work day in and day out. And I just want to encourage them to keep working at this. We will get there. We will get there. Change is slow, and getting to the right place is slow. But each day we are making this world, this country, a better place. So I just encourage all the listeners here, all of IJIS, just keep doing this really difficult work. It's really important.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your contribution.
Absolutely.
We couldn't be more grateful.
Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful conference.
Thank you. To all our attendees, we will be joining our next session in about half an hour. We thank you very much for your participation. And let's see, our next session is going to bring together representatives from various domains. We will be starting at 11:15, so we'll take a short break. Thank you all.